Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network. I'm your host and I'm joined again by Dallas King. How are you, Dallas?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. It was your birthday at the weekend. I hope you had a good one, a bit of a film geek one as well, I hope.
It was, yeah. No, it wasn't bad. But went down to Glasgow the day after, so yeah, caught the tail end of the festival, which was good.
Excellent. Well, obviously, we're not going to be discussing Duncan Jones today because he has not released a movie again since Mute. So we're going to touch on something that we've both been really up to the past few weeks, and that's been at the Glasgow Film Festival. We've watched quite a lot of movies between us, and we're going to kind of touch on some of those today, some that we'd really enjoyed and would recommend, and kind of maybe review some of the ones that perhaps weren't for us. But firstly, it's impossible to ignore that the Oscars happened last night, and Dallas, you had your predictions all written up. So was the Oscars the way you expected it to go last night? Was there any surprises and any snubs that caught you by surprise?
Well, I was doing my tally of my predictions last night. I never normally predict the short films and stuff like that because I never catch them all before going into the Oscars. So I only try to predict the films that the categories I've actually seen. So I ended up with 15 out of 20, which wasn't too bad, but really annoyingly, I did have The Shape of Water as winning Best Picture until I had a slight wobble and thought, you know what, Get Out might just sneak it at the end, and so it's got a nice score through, and then I've written Get Out, so I lost out on that one. But the main awards seemed to go the way that the predictions went. I mean, the acting ones were pretty much sewn up, I think, at the end of last year. I mean, those guys won every single thing going there, so there was a few sort of surprises. I was hoping for Baby Driver winning editing. I thought that it might have just sort of sneaked past the finish line because it did win the BAFTA as well, but overall I think it was the Oscars went where they were deserved, I think. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm relatively happy. I mean, I didn't watch it. I have TiVo'd it and watched a chunk of it this afternoon after work. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to complain with a few of them. I would have liked Timothée Chalamet to have won Best Actor and Laurie Metcalf to win Best Supporting Actress. But, I mean, I'm really happy for Del Toro. I really liked Shape of the Water. It wouldn't have been the one I would have picked for Best Picture, but it's impossible not to root for the guy, and I'm really happy things paid off. Sam Rockwell winning the Oscar, Roger Deakins finally getting his nods. There was a few other things. I wish Lady Bird had got anything, but I think that film's going to kind of stand the test of time without sort of any of the Oscar plaudits or anything like that. So yeah, I'm happy, but only a few mild annoyances, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think Sam Rockwell winning was I would like to think it was actually a sort of retroactive one for Moon.
Yes,
a couple of years ago when he should have been nominated. Deakins, no, absolutely, and it was a deserving Oscar. I mean, cinematography in Blade Runner was just incredible. It wasn't like Gary Oldman winning when it was more of a sort of career achievement, lifetime award, rather than actually being the best performance. Because as you said, yeah, I think Timothée Chalamet was probably the best out of the five, and it would have been nice if he'd won. And Shape of Water was it was nice to see that win over Three Billboards, but my pick I think would have been Dunkirk for best film overall. Yeah,
I thought Dunkirk would win it. It feels like, I think someone summed up today that it's like this finely tuned Ferrari car, and it's just everything about it works so well. I think people sometimes forget it's like the Oscars are a part of its, winning Best Picture is also about the production, the science, the technology involved, and I felt Dunkirk really pioneered so many amazing things, and I thought it would win Best Picture. I mean, there's not really been any momentum sort of behind it, I feel, kind of going into sort of the big Oscar wins. I think it was always sort of set to win the technical ones, but there wasn't sort of the things where you would see with a BAFTA or some of the other awards ceremonies where Dunkirk's picking up this sort of steam. So I wasn't too surprised when it missed out, but pleasantly surprised that Shape of Water won. I thought it was going to go to something like Three Billboards, or perhaps, as you say, maybe Get Out as a bit of a surprise.
I think it was, I think with Three Billboards it sort of faded slightly. There was a bit of a backlash towards it, and I think we have seen, like in the past sort of 9 years or something, there has been this sort of split between the two between director and picture going to different films, and I think a lot of that's come down from this preferential voting where people actually, I think, put about 5 films on and they're actually weighted in terms of the numbers of votes. And I was looking at this as where I sort of thought The Shape of Water initially was going to get through, and then Get Out might have sneaked past the post, and that you need a certain number of votes to win, and they sort of discount certain films, and then the votes for those films are then allocated to other ones on the list. So there's always a better chance of something maybe that might sneak through rather with in the BAFTAs and Golden Globes. I'm presuming it's just the sort of first past the post, sort of whoever's got the most votes wins and stuff.
From there, so we're overall pretty happy with the results then, Dallas.
Overall, yeah, happy with the results, and yeah, no, I couldn't get a stream on my computer last night from the States, so unfortunately I wasn't able to see it, but I did catch up with the highlights this morning, and it sounds like a rather uneventful ceremony, but in terms of results, yeah, no, happy.
Yeah, I suppose compared to last year's event with with the wrong movie being announced as Best Picture, I think anything this year was going to be a bit uneventful compared to that.
Yeah, no, yeah. So I think, I think they would have had to do something sort of spectacular to top that, but I'm sure they were playing it safe this year, I think, more than anything.
Definitely. So let's kind of dive into sort of what's been keeping us busy the kind of past 2 weeks. Obviously, we've touched upon it, so we've both been pretty regular at the Glasgow Film Festival, and I think I can speak for both of us. We'd probably have liked to have been there a little bit more, but unfortunately we were sort of jinxed by the how do I put this, the beast from the east, the snowstorm that's shut the Glasgow Film Festival for a day or two.
Snowmageddon and all sorts of things it was called, yeah.
Yeah, it seemed to throw everything off kilter for a few days. So we managed to catch quite a few different movies, and we'll kind of start with the opening movie and close with the finishing movie for the season. So Isle of Dogs, the new Wes Anderson movie, we got to kind of see that about a month and a bit earlier than the rest of the UK. That was the movie they chose to kickstart the season, and I can hardly think of a better movie to do so. What did you think of Wes Anderson's new stop animation dog movie?
I thought it was fantastic. It was pretty much perfect score from me. I thought the animation was superb. I thought the story was great, and the voice cast was excellent. And out of the films that I saw, it's still at the end of the festival. It was still up at the top for me. Yeah,
it was definitely up the top for me. I was really excited going into this one, and I remember turning to you at the end to see what you thought of it. And you had a bit of a poker face, and I thought, oh my god, I think Dallas maybe doesn't like this one. But I mean, I really enjoyed it as well. But I was saying it to my friend when I got home afterwards. I was like, I really want to see it again. With movies like Wes Anderson films, that there's always so much going on. They're so busy, and they come with such a weight of expectation. I was really excited to see it, and there was so much kind of going on in the movie and the background. I love to be able to watch it again, a bit more relaxed, and just kind of take in all these amazing little touches and all the things that make a Wes Anderson movie so wonderfully unique. I think it was definitely one of the standouts of the festival for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the animation is absolutely superb. I mean, I expect nothing less after the fantastic Mr. Fox, which I thought was another brilliant film. And I think, there's just so much. The detail in the background is so good. And I think there's going to be a lot of little sort of Easter eggs and things to find, I think, in the background as well. Yeah,
definitely. And one thing that I really liked about the movie was, and I never really thought about it going in, but it sort of, I think with a film like this, it's definitely going to appeal to younger people. It's going to appeal to older folk like us as well. It's going to have that broad appeal. But I really liked how bold it was in the respect that we have these talking dogs. You know, we've seen that all before. But it's obviously based in Japan. And pretty much every single Japanese character speaks in a Japanese tongue without any subtitles and the odd bit of translation from a TV host. I really liked that, and I thought that was such a nice touch to treat the audiences as grown-ups, really, to say, well, you can interpret what they're saying in their native tongue without the subtitles, whether it's, through their body language, what the situation's like. I thought that was a real classy touch, and I'm sure once it gets to Japan and Asia, there'll be subtitled translations for us to kind of go, oh, so this is what they were actually saying. I thought that was a really nice touch.
Yeah, no, I really like that aspect of the storytelling because, I I think as Alfred Hitchcock once said, I think it was that you should be able to play a film with the volume off and still be able to follow what was going on. And yeah, I mean between the animation and it was just, you could clearly tell what was happening and the motives of all the characters and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, yeah, there was like, I think Frances McDormand plays an interpreter in one of the scenes, but other than that, yeah, there is no translation or whatever, because I think there's a bit at the beginning that says basically the dog's barks have been translated into English, but all of the languages have been kept as they were. And yeah, it's a really bold choice. I think it might be difficult for some of the younger audiences to follow to begin with, but I think in terms of for the adults, I think it was a fantastic choice.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of my favourite parts about the movie was coming out afterwards. People weren't just saying, "Oh, what did you like about the movie?" Everyone asked, "What was your favourite dog?" And I think I heard everyone give a completely different answer each time. So I thought that was a really nice touch. I think I've never heard that question coming out of a Wes Anderson movie before.
Yeah, no, I think my favourite dog, personally, I think it was Jeff Goldblum's gossiping dog.
Yes.
Who would always say, "Did you hear the rumour about it?" and such. I think he was my favourite, but the standout vocal work, I think, for me was probably Bryan Cranston, who hasn't actually worked with Wes Anderson before. I thought his term was fantastic, and along with Greta Gerwig as well. I thought she sort of fitted in seamlessly to the cast of regulars like Bill Murray and Bob Balaban and stuff.
Yeah, I think Greta Gerwig for a few years has had a date with destiny of appearing in a Wes Anderson film, and I expect her to be a bit of a regular now in the Wes Anderson players.
Oh no, absolutely! I'd be looking forward to see her in a live action Wes Anderson film soon as well.
So, what we're going to do, we're going to take turnaround, because I think there's another one movie or two perhaps, that we've seen each together. So, I'd love to know, Dallas, what's next up on your list that you saw at the film festival?
Well, next up chronologically for me was actually an old film. It was Angels with Dirty Faces. Now, this was part of the Rebel Heroes series from the festival, and it was early morning screenings of classic films featuring anti-heroes and stuff like that. So this was a James Cagney gangster film from the 1930s, and one of the great things about the Glasgow Film Festival is it always tries to be as inclusive as possible, and so these films were actually free screenings in the mornings. You just had to turn up on the door and you get an old-fashioned style ticket which they'd rip, and then you get to sit down and watch a classic film introduced by one of the co-directors of the festival, Alan Hunter, and his introductions are always sort of packed full of facts that even a movie geek like me sometimes isn't always aware of. So they're great to get a better insight in the film, and just great to see a classic on the big screen. This is one film which I'd never seen on the big screen before, and the ending is still, one of the most sort of powerful endings in cinema history. And I don't want to give it away for anyone who hasn't seen it before, but there's still that ambiguity as to when James Cagney's character goes to meet his final fate as to what his true intentions are. Is that one that you've seen?
No, I've not seen it. So I've been too busy watching all these brand new ones, and I was never in early enough to see it because I was kind of commuting in from Edinburgh every day. The joy of peak time trains meant I was always kind of getting in about like 10:45 along those lines. So no, I never got a chance to go to any of those kind of early screenings. I know they were doing a Groundhog Day in an apartment, like a bed and breakfast every single day. So unfortunately, I never got the chance to see that one either. So I was a bit disappointed I couldn't kind of partake in those sort of strands.
Yeah, no, I did have a ticket for the Groundhog Day, but sadly that was one that I was snowbound in Aberdeen for. But I partly, you could blame the Glasgow Film Festival for putting Groundhog Day on, because clearly Puxatawny followed in shadow, and it was 6 more weeks of winter, and then that was it. It was like, snowbound and stuck in.
Absolutely.
I think it was 3 days that were affected by in the end.
So obviously that was an old-timey classic. What was your next kind of new movie, a bit of a festival premiere?
Next new one for me was Columbus, actually.
Yeah, I've seen that one too.
You saw that one as well. Yeah. No, it was I thought it was a fantastic. So it was a definite slow burner. It was just sort of a really intimate sort of character study about two people sort of at a crossroads in life in Columbus, Indiana, which is a sort of mecca for architecture enthusiasts around the world. They sort of come to this place, and I just thought it was a sort of stunning, sort of beautiful, poetic film, and It's one that it probably won't get a huge release over in the UK, but it's definitely one that people should seek out if it does pop up in the local independent cinema, I think.
Yeah, for me, I was Columbus was one of my most anticipated movies, and I wrote about it in the blog of the kind of 8 movies I'd recommend people would go see, and it sort of stems from, I don't know if you ever watch it, but film critic for IndieWire David Ehrlich every year makes these amazing video montages of his favorite movies of the year. The past 2 years, I've done my attempt at making one, never as good as his, but with that, I always kind of write down these list of movies, and some of them we get in the UK, and some of them are kind of festival movies in America that are either going to come to the UK months or perhaps a year down the line, or it could be something like this, which becomes a bit of a festival regular. So when I saw that on his list, I had it written down. I love John Cho, and Haley Lou Richardson, who plays Casey in the movie. I thought she was fantastic in Edge of 17, which is a movie that I thought was just wonderful. And so when I saw those two together, I was really interested. And I must admit, watching the trailer made me think, oh, this kind of has a sort of before trilogy vibe. You know, 2 people perhaps walking through a town talking about life and philosophy. It was sort of right up my street. So yeah, I was really excited to see this one. And I thought it was really well put together, written. And I was really surprised by the beauty of the architecture as well. I mean, I can imagine people that have the opportunity to go to Columbus, imagine there'd be a small spike in correlation between people that watch this movie and then people that end up having a wee trip to America and pass through the town. I thought it was absolutely stunning scenery, and it was just one of these movies that it was just a lovely story, well told. This young girl that's, you know, sort of trapped in this beautiful town but doesn't want to leave, and just sort of coming to terms with perhaps moving on. And yeah, it was just a wonderfully simple story, well told and well acted. It's the type of movie that you go to film festivals to see, and hopefully, you know, whether it's people like David Ehrlich in his videos or people like us talking about it or others that are leaving a review, that hopefully other people will then seek it out as well, because movies like this don't tend to fall into your laps. You need to seek out in the backwaters of an Amazon Prime or, as you say, an indie cinema, like one showing a week sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I think this is certainly a film that if it did appear on like Netflix or Amazon Prime, it's definitely one that people should turn on and give it a view. I mean, I think we were talking about Mute last week and about how it's one that would really benefit from sort of, you know, the big screen experience. But I don't think there'd be anything really lost with if the first time that you saw Columbus was on the small screen, because it's that kind of film which, yeah, you could just sit back, relax, and enjoy just 2 people sort of getting to know each other. And I think, yeah, like what you were saying with the with people going to Columbus for the architecture, they might now start to go for the movie. And I think Sacramento, on the back of Lady Bird, is now doing sort of walking tours, going around the sort of city, sort of seeing some of the sights from the film. And I'm sure that Columbus, Indiana, will now have a Columbus movie walking tour around to incorporate some of the architecture that is featured in the film as well.
Oh, most definitely. And I think Haley Lou will be one of these actresses. You know, John Cho is a bit familiar to a lot of us, especially genre fans. And I see her now, you know, on the back of Edge of 17, Split, and now Columbus, being someone that's going to be kind of being recognised more and more by casting directors and will be put into you know, really good films. So I think she's definitely going to be a face we'll be seeing a lot more of in the coming years.
Yeah, no, I haven't actually seen Edge of 17, but I think I did see her in Split, and so. But I think this is definitely going to be a huge breakout role for her, and it was nice to see John Cho doing something there that wasn't non-genre and sort of really sort of quiet, subtle performance. And because I think the first thing I ever saw him in, he was credited as MILF Guy 1 in American Pie, so he's come a long way, I think.
Definitely, I think for many fans, no matter what he appears in for the next 50 years, he'll always be that MILF guy. But, you know, I suppose notoriety is always something.
I mean, if it's, you know, if he can use that notoriety just to pull in a few people to checking out this film, then it's worth it, I think.
Definitely. So it sounds like a film that we both recommend there. One of the next movies I went to see, and this was one I was really excited about and tried to go in dark to, was Blew My Mind. It's a Norwegian movie, a Swiss movie, my apologies, and it seems to be sort of following in this sort of kind of trend that we've sort of seen in the past year, where movies like Raw and Thelma have really stood out with kind of European movies that explore body horror with teenage women. And it was sort of in that kind of mindset. I thought this movie kind of appealed to me. And it's the story about a 15-year-old girl whose body starts to transform at the sort of time of her beginning her period. And her body is starting to show fish-like traits. Her skin is changing at the bottom of her legs. Her feet are becoming webbed. And as she starts to transform, she sort of loses control. She takes drink, drugs, acts out sexually. She really goes full out in this. Her relationship becomes strained with her parents, and I found that to be really quite interesting. I mean, for probably fans like us of these sorts of movies, it's nothing perhaps overly new, this body horror transformation, but I thought it was really well done. Luna Wedler, who plays Mia, the titular character who's undergoing the transformation, I thought was it was really quite impressive. How much she put into a movie like this. She didn't kind of hold back in any of the scenes whatsoever. And for a lot of actresses, whether they were Hollywood or European, could really make them feel a bit uncomfortable. And Zoe Pastel Hutchison, I'm probably going to pronounce that last name wrong. She was someone else I never had heard about either. She's a model, Instagram star. She plays the best friend Gianna, and I thought she was excellent as well in the role. We've seen that sort of role before. The sort of bitchy best friend that's a bit too cool for school, but then sort of kind of mellows out. I thought she was fantastic in the role, and I thought the performances were excellent, and the kind of climax to the movie, while perhaps not too surprising, was still really well put together. I would really recommend people check this one out. I think the difficulty with it is who's the right audience. For someone like myself, and probably for many others, it kind of blends things quite well, that you have this coming of age story, great. You also have this body horror element as well, great. But there's certain scenes which could be quite challenging for those types of audiences, that you have this young 15-year-old girl that's acting out quite graphic sexual scenes that you kind of do make you sort of feel a bit uncomfortable in your seat. And the type of audience that are going to see this film, whether that's something that's going to sit well with them, if they're going for a coming of age story or if they're going for a body horror movie, remains to be seen. So I think it's going to have an interesting time finding the right audience, but I think it's definitely a worthy addition to this sort of growing European trend of body horror films.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's one that I had wanted to see, but sadly just didn't fit into my schedule. But I think it was also interesting to see that one was not actually screened as part of the Fright Fest strand at the Glasgow Film Festival. It was actually in the sort of audience award. So there was something about it that they clearly thought, it could break out from just a pure sort of horror side, and it was actually much more than that. And I think based on sort of Raw and it was Thelma at the tail end of last year, I think there definitely is a market. If it gets picked up by the right distributor in the UK and they market it to the similar audiences as they did with Raw, whatever, I think it could be a bit of a success if it gets the marketing right and finds the right niche sort of audience for it.
Definitely, yeah. So I'm glad that you're going to go seek it out, and hopefully, I think it's going to be one of these ones that with film festival movies, you think, oh, this is going to be one that'll just end up on Netflix, or this is probably going to be the limit of its cinema run. I think Blue does have the potential to be a real breakout from the festival, and as I say, it was up for the audience award, so it's definitely got that appeal, as you say. So, Dallas, what was your next film at the festival?
Next one that I saw was Todd Haynes' Wonderstruck, and this was a film set in New York, but in two different time periods. It's got sort of two concurrent storylines. One set in the sort of 70s, where a young boy, following the death of his mother, runs off to New York to try and find his father. And then at the same time, there's a storyline set in the 20s, about a young deaf girl who is in search, heads to New York away from her oppressive father in search of an actress who she watches on the silver screen. And basically, the two storylines eventually merge together. But for myself, I found that it took too long for the reveal of how it all links together to happen, and that was a bit disappointing for me. It didn't really gel completely, and also tonally between the two stories, they cross-cutted between the two stories. It was almost like every couple of minutes, so it was very sort of rapid fire, changing back and forth and back and forth. And for me, it was just a bit too discombobulating, and for me, it didn't really work overall.
Yeah, it's definitely not a film that I had really ever kind of put onto my list, and probably one I might not rush to see myself.
Yeah, it's an odd one to know who it's going to be marketed at. I mean, you've got Todd Haynes, who had directed Carol, so I mean, there's pedigree there. It's got Julianne Moore in it, in a dual role, so I mean, there's definitely a hook to get there. I mean, when I was watching it, I was like, this sort of, it could appeal to sort of the same sort of crowd that, if you know, Martin Scorsese's Hugo, it has that sort of affection for sort of culture and stuff like that. In this case, it's sort of museums. Both storylines sort of end up being set in the American Museum of Natural History, but it wasn't until after looking at the film to review it, I found out that the author of the book that the film was based on is actually the same guy who'd done Hugo. So actually, sort of that all sort of fell into place, and I understood sort of a bit more of why it was doing that. But for me, it didn't really work, even though, I mean, the photography and cinematography was fantastic. I mean, once the young boy reaches 70s New York, it just feels like it was set in the 70s. It's got that grittiness and grime to the locations and the cinematography. I mean, period-wise, I mean, it just is spot on, but overall the story just didn't really capture my imagination at all, which was a shame.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of these ones. It was I think it was well reviewed, kind of in America when it came out last year. So a bit surprising to hear it's a disappointment, but maybe it'll be one I'll kind of check out one day. But yeah, it seems I think that would be kind of one of the showcase movies of the festival. So it's just a shame it didn't seem to kind of connect for you.
Yeah, no, it was a shame because I went into it basically because it was Todd Haynes. I didn't know much about it going in, as I think we think with a lot of the sort of festival films that we go, sometimes, you know, you pick a few banner films of I must definitely see that, and then you just sort of fit in other films just in sort of based on the times and the screenings that you can make it into, and then you get great surprises, and then sometimes you inevitably go in and you will get the odd disappointment, which is a shame.
Yeah, it's always got that filter, doesn't it? That I think with festival movies, you try and go in with as little as possible, and you know, you kind of get either surprised or enjoy it, or there's times you think, oh, I made a mistake here. But I suppose that's just the pick and mix element of something like a festival. It's not like you're going into Cineworld or things like that. You know, you're seeing a lot of different movies over a lot of times, and you know, some things will just click, and it's naturally almost a proving ground for films before they potentially go on to a mainstream level.
Yeah, and I mean, with the sort of paid festivals like this, I mean, there is always that thing of you've paid for the ticket, so you might as well watch it to the end just to see. But I mean, there's other festivals that you can go to where, you know, if you've got a press pass, I mean, you've got a bunch of free tickets. If you don't like something, I've seen people sort of get up and walk out after 15 minutes and go off to try and find something else, because just something else that they want to see and see if they can find a gem in the rough.
Yeah, definitely. Well, unfortunately for me, it was also not a great experience with my next movie, Kissing Candace. It's about a 17-year-old who's looking to escape her town in Northern Ireland, and she sort of finds solace in her imagination, and she dreams about this handsome black boyfriend that's going to save her from this kind of grim town in Northern Ireland. And then one day, when she's being kind of going to be kidnapped in a sort of prank from a group of adults in the town, she's saved by her dream boyfriend, and that sort of makes for an interesting premise that then sort of does nothing really exciting with it for the rest of the movie. It's a kind of writing and directorial debut from Alfie McCardle, who has done some YouTube videos, kind of adverts, and Anne Skelly, she's been a TV star. She's kind of now, this is her debut movie. And I was kind of watching at the beginning thinking, oh, this is quite interesting. It's kind of got that really kind of gritty, grim feel. The performances feel very raw. So it's kind of like you think, well, this is very much that kind of festival movie vibe. This is quite interesting. But then it doesn't really do much. Like, she's kind of got this epilepsy which almost hints at something more could be happening, but then it does nothing with it. And it just seems to just be this movie about this gang kind of turning against one of their own, who's this dream guy. And it just doesn't really do much. It just seems like a kind of romp about Northern Ireland with a bit of grittiness, a bit of darkness, and not too much. I did find myself quite a few times looking at my watch and just thinking, this isn't as what I was kind of hoping for. I kind of had a few sentence paragraph and I thought, this sounds quite interesting. Not to be with this one, and a bit of a disappointment, but I think the visuals are certainly interesting and appealing, and as I say, festivals can be a proving ground for films, whether they go on to go somewhere a bit more mainstream. But I think with this, McCardle kind of shows enough visual flares and interesting kind of ideas that I think she could be a director to certainly keep an eye on. Perhaps just this movie was just one that didn't work for me, and perhaps it will be an interesting sort of, where does she go next from this?
Yeah, no, I think that is, it's always with these festival films that, you see films that, potentially might not get a huge release, but I mean, it's about getting the profile up of the filmmaker and stuff. And yeah, I mean, there could be someone who's from the industry who sees these films, sees something in the director or the writer, and then that can lead to promising things. And hopefully that's the case with something, because I always feel bad when I'm at a festival and you see a film and you don't really like it. And I'm not sure if it's the same with you, but I almost find myself trying to look for the positives in something, even if it's bad or whatever, because I mean, it's, there's lots of people who say that, making a film is incredibly difficult, just to get a film made and sort of released and whatever is a huge achievement. So I always find myself at festivals maybe being slightly more forgiving than I would when actually paying to see something at the cinema. I don't know if that's the same with yourself.
Yeah, definitely, because I always feel they could be in the audience as well, and especially with festivals like this, you get people that come over and you're like, yeah, that was good. Yeah, if you bumped into them in the bar afterwards, you would be focusing on the positives of the movie, whereas you never you want to kind of champion things like this. That, I was speaking with a filmmaker, and, she was talking about how, her film had been well received, but, she'd travelled all the way from Chicago, and talking about her experience at the festival. And you just think, if you travel all that way, you go through all that, and you want to think, even if something's maybe not going so well, to pick up on the positives, to be kind of champion things like that. And, I hadn't seen her film or anything like that, but it just reminds you of the sort of the human element to festivals as well. People spend a lot of money sometimes to submit these things, to travel over to, perhaps half-empty screens, or even to come here and the weather's affected their movies. So you're always kind of conscious, it's, you may not like something, but someone's put a lot of time and effort into this, and this is this type of environment, film festivals, where we're film fans, and if we don't like something, we'll be constructive about it, and we'll kind of champion it as I wonder what will be next from this person. And, I think you feel some sort of, experience with them as well.
Yeah, and they could also be on Twitter as well, which is what I found as well.
Oh, yes.
You've got all these people, you're coming out and you're making snap judgments and you're tweeting it and stuff like that, and you get, them sort of retweeting positive comments and stuff like that, but you are also aware that, they will see the negative ones as well. And that sort of leads me on to the next film that I saw, because I was tweeting about a very full screen going into the film, and then that was retweeted by the filmmakers, and then when I came out and wasn't that enamoured with the film, I purposely decided not to tweet about it afterwards, because you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I never tag any the official account or actresses or anyone in it. If I didn't like the movie, I just kind of hope you don't see my review, and I'll just be in the corner, but you go on and just share all the ones that have added you and the good stuff.
I hadn't even actually tagged any official things. I just typed the name of the film into my tweet, and someone was clearly searching for certain keywords and stuff like that. But the film that I saw was Super November, which was written by Josie Long and directed by Douglas King, and it's sort of set in Glasgow, and it's a sort of story about a group of friends who it's sort of the production company is called Caledonian Mumblecore, so it's sort of you can sort of tell by the production title what sort of type of film they're going for, and so it's sort of like it's got a story, but there's a lot of sort of improvisation in the dialogue and stuff like that, and it's people sort of talking about relationships and stuff like that, but beyond that, there's this sort of storyline going on in the background about an election, and there's a new government coming in, and then there's a sort of a time jump of sort of 6 months, and this government's posing sort of travel bans and sort of curfews and stuff like this, and it's sort of dealing with the fallout of that, but you never see any of that directly. And the director was sort of doing a Q&A afterwards, and he was talking about how basically it was made on a micro budget, so they could only do certain things, and if he'd been given an extra £50,000 or whatever, he would have filmed what was happening out with this sort of central group of friends to give a better idea of what was going on and how it's all sort of tied together. But for me, I just wasn't really feeling it, and it did sort of feel very sort of I would have liked to have known more about the government side and how it all related, because I sort of felt that it wasn't really sort of gelling together as a film overall, and it was a bit of a disappointment for me. But I mean, it was set in Glasgow, so I mean there was a huge hometown crowd, and it was very warmly received, but it just one that wasn't for me in the end.
Yeah, we were actually going to interview Josie Long about her involvement in this movie, but due to kind of the beast from the east again, we weren't able to have a sit down with her to discuss this movie. It would have been quite interesting to hear her thoughts on the movie and so on. So a bit of a dampener with the weather there, but kind of talking about kind of sit downs and meet and greets, as it were. This was a film unfortunately I wasn't able to see, also due to the snow. But Mobile Homes is about a young mother who's drifting from hotel to hotel with her sort of boyfriend and her 8-year-old son. But the relationship between the two is quite toxic. They're scraping by, they're kind of hustling between sort of towns, and then they discover a mobile home community which offers an alternative life. And Imogen Potts and Callum Turner spoke with me on the red carpet about this movie, so here's their thoughts on Mobile Homes.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, how you doing? Nice to meet you.
So just going to do kind of 4 questions if you guys want to jump in.
Yeah, I was curious. I'll go first. What was it like playing such a kind of duplicitous role? It's obviously kind of hard not to draw parallels with many of the kind of male celebrities and politicians we're hearing about. What was it like kind of taking on a role this sort of sinister?
I never saw it as sinister. I saw it as someone who was on a hustle and was determined to get to his goal, which was peace. Actually, he wants to live away from society and on his own with his wife and his surrogate child. And the only way that he knows how to do that is. Not the best way. I never thought of him as sinister. I just thought of him as that song, the Bruce Springsteen song, Born to Run, obviously.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's kind of like that, and he's living and he's going, and the film, the only reason I guess it becomes super sinister is because he's pushed to extremes, because the relationship that he's in with this woman who he loves, she doesn't believe in the dream anymore. He still believes in the dream. Yeah. And so she's been torn away from him, and he doesn't understand why.
Is that always your motive as an actor, is always to see the good in someone and to portray it from, I think this person believes they're right, and then it's open to the audience to interpret how that...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've got to find the reasons behind the actions. If I was just to play... I guess he's not the greatest, he's not the smartest guy, but he's pretty intelligent too. He's just in an extreme situation, so he's pushed to those extremities, born out of that.
Perfect, thank you very much, Joel.
And you of course worked with Imogen before on
video.
What was it like reuniting with her for this?
It's amazing. She got me the job, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it was great. I mean, Amy's one of the best actors around, so yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And I was just wondering if you could tell us about any of your upcoming projects that you perhaps have after this one.
A Fantastic Beasts.
Okay,
is the next one.
Is there anything you could tell us about that, or what was that like working on
yeah,
that?
it was incredible. It was actual magic. I play Eddie Redmayne's Newt's brother, so Eddie's brother. Yeah.
I look forward to seeing that. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thank
All
you,
the best.
guys.
Good luck.
Nice to meet you.
Callum to speak to the in-house group. Hi, how's it
Hi,
going?
Amy. Nice to meet you. I'm Louis from Hollywood News.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I just wanted to begin by asking, what was it about the character of Ali that drew you into the project?
Oh, from the get-go, the whole story was really interesting to me, and it seemed very unique, the storyline. You know, anything with roosters is going to be slightly off the beaten track, so that was cool. And I liked her because there wasn't an immediate redemptive factor to the story with her. She's very much sort of as she comes. There's no real message there, and I kind of like that. I like that she was very much a protagonist who wasn't necessarily all that likable. Just her story is worth telling, I think, and I had great faith in the director, and Callum in turn is my favourite English actor, so yeah. It was
I was just going to ask, of course you worked with Callum before in Green Room, what was it like reuniting with him for this?
Oh, it's the best. I mean, it's just beautiful. He's so talented and smart, and you know, I was lucky as hell to get to do this with him, so that was really cool.
Yeah.
But no, it's sort of gorgeous. You meet people when you're young to work together, and you hope that you'll still be doing it when you're 80. So yeah.
No, no problem. Thank you very much. I'll pass you on.
Thanks.
And what was it like kind of with this movie? It seems to have landed at kind of an interesting time about toxic relationships. What do you feel this movie is going to kind of resonate with people when they watch it in this sort of environment?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's certainly that nature to it, the toxic relationship part, but there's also these people are itinerants, you know, who are marginalised on the edge of society, and I think their story is often brushed under the carpet. And we don't acknowledge what else is happening in the rest of the world. You know, I live in New York, and New York, London's in metropolitan places. You're in a bubble. Politics and social politics are all sort of you can become a vehicle of sort of a cliche that's going around. So no, I think it's an important film in terms of like opening up that.
And do you find it quite surreal now that you're at the stage where you're playing people's parents and you're a mother in movies?
No, I think it's great. I mean, I think all of that is really silly, and to shy away from that, because the more experience a character has, the more complex they'll be and more fun to play. So.
Perfect. Well, good luck with the premiere tonight, and all the best.
Much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
See you guys. Keep warm.
So yeah, that's Mobile Home. So hopefully that'll be a film I can maybe catch a bit down the line. I was a bit disappointed to miss out on this one. Obviously Imogen and Callum had been together in Green Room, so and I thought they were fantastic in that. So I would love to catch this movie down the line.
That's what he was in. I'd seen him on the red carpet, and I was like, that face looks really familiar, and I couldn't place where he was from. But yeah, no, he was in the band in Green Room. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Definitely. So what about yourself? What was your next choice?
Well, I was going into my final day, which was the closing day of the festival. I'd managed to make it down. The transport links were thankfully back up and running. So I started the day off with another one of the classic films from the Rebel Hero series, and it was a Dog Day Afternoon with Al Pacino. Have you seen that one?
I have seen that one, but it's been a long time since I've watched it. I think it was my mate had the VHS and we watched it as young teenagers, so long overdue a rewatch on DVD or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's one that I'd watched on DVD probably about 8-9 years ago, and I'd seen it for the first time. So this is my second viewing of it, and it's the first time I'd seen it on the big screen, and I'd forgotten how funny it was. It's a weird one. It's about Al Pacino plays Sonny, a guy who robs a bank in Brooklyn, basically to get money for his boyfriend's sex change operation, and he goes in with another one of his bank robber friends, a guy called Sal, played by John Caviezel, and they're clearly amateurs at this, and it all starts to go wrong, and it's got that weird sort of humour to it where the absurdity of the situation sort of comes out, and even like the bank tellers and stuff who have been sort of kidnapped at this point are making jokes, and they sort of end up being on the side of the bank robbers against the police, who are quite heavy-handed in their reactions and stuff like this. And I mean, everyone, you think, even if you haven't seen Dog Day Afternoon, everyone's sort of familiar with the famous sort of Attica, Attica, Attica moment. But the whole film is just superb, and it's sort of seeing it on the big screen. You're reminded how good Pacino was in the day, and how it'd be great to see him back at that sort of height again in the future. And fingers crossed, you sort of teaming with Scorsese for The Irishman, we might get to see that Pacino again.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I suppose with him and De Niro, you're always hoping that there's just one more great movie that they've got in them, and hopefully it's on the verge soon. But yeah, definitely a movie I need to revisit.
Yeah, no, absolutely would recommend that one. I don't think it'll be on the big screen anytime soon, but definitely worth a rewatch on the small screen as well.
Yeah, so returning to the big screen, Lynn Ramsey, came back to do a hometown premiere of You Were Never Really Here, which kind of comes out, I think, in about a week's time, maybe this Friday, following Friday.
Friday the 9th, yeah.
Yep. So that's kind of coming up soon. So she seems to be touring the UK, showcasing this movie just now. And the trailer, I think, if anyone's seen it, immediately pulls you in. And this was a movie that I was incredibly excited to see. And I think it's very much in that sort of style of her previous movie. We Need to Talk About Kevin, where the audio visual sort of combination really makes you feel uncomfortable in your seat. It sort of seems to be permanently playing that sort of brown note that has you kind of feeling a bit uncomfortable. You're in a bit of an unease, and I really enjoyed this. It's the story of Joe, who his mission is really to find young girls that have gone missing, and it's one of these movies that it's only 82 minutes. I think it was filmed in a month in New York, and it feels, in the best possible way, stripped to the bare bones. And every sort of decision you think, whoa, I wouldn't mind learning a little bit more about this. Nope, it's cut to the bone. Everything that we know about Joe is what we need to know. Anything that's happening is what we need to know. And I really like that element of it. I think it'd be so easy to do a movie like this, over-explaining everything, that we know Joe has a bit of a mysterious past that's kind of glanced at in some flashbacks here and there, but that's as far as it goes. Johnny Greenwood, who was robbed last night, delivered another fantastic score for this one. Very much different to the beauty of something like Phantom Thread. This one also kind of ties into the mood where it feels a bit punk rocky. It's like a punk band just sort of tuning up, warming up before they're really bursting into song. I thought it was really fantastic as an experience. My only real disappointment was some of the familiar tropes that we'd expect from a movie like this, that it's about a guy looking for a politician's missing daughter, and then some of the conventional things that we'd expect from this genre do happen, and there are times where things kind of go in the opposite direction. But there's a few times where I thought, well, I know where this scene's going to go, where this is going to go, and I just felt that kind of just knocked a little bit off it for me. But I would highly recommend it. It's a movie that I don't think anyone's going to forget in a hurry, and I think it's hopefully the return of Lynn Ramsey now, maybe making movies maybe once every few years as opposed to maybe every 6 or 7.
Yeah, no, it's one that I'm really looking forward to, and I will be catching it this weekend. And I think if there's a film that, if it does play into genre tropes and whatever, I think if it does them well, you are more willing to forgive. Because, I mean, even just, I don't know a huge amount about the film. I'm trying to sort of keep my knowledge to a bare minimum. But, it's like John Wick, which came out a couple of years ago, it's a guy with a mysterious past, but you're not force-fed all the information. It comes sort of drips and drabs, and it does play into the genre tropes, but it does it in such a wonderful style and such a great flow that you don't care and you get caught up into it. And it plays out beautifully, I think.
Yeah, so I look forward to hearing your opinion on it when you see it, and I'm sure we'll read about it on your blog.
Oh, absolutely! I'll definitely be reviewing it, and yeah, I can't wait for that one, and especially the Johnny Greenwood score. I think should be fantastic. I mean, There Will Be Blood remains one of my favourite film scores of all time. And you say he was robbed last night, but I think there was probably quite a few people robbed as well, because I think Hans Zimmer should have won for Dunkirk. Personally, myself.
Yeah, there's so many good scores as well, but I would recommend it was part of it was sort of on almost immediately after the screening on the Saturday. Lynn Ramsey did a Q&A with Edith Bowman for her soundtracking podcast, and it was largely all focused about the use of music in this movie, whether it's Johnny Greenwood's score or some kind of classic music that was used. I would highly recommend that after you see the movie, check out Edith Bowman's podcast. It's going to make an interesting companion piece to the movie, because when you think of Lynn Ramsey, audio, music, sound design is so critical to the mood of her movies, and I think the discussion really helps kind of with that discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to check that out. And I guess speaking of Q&As, I was able to catch a Ben Wheatley Q&A on the Sunday. He was able to make it up from Brighton to Glasgow for the festival. He didn't have any new films out, but he's been a bit of a friend of the Glasgow Film Festival for the last few years. He's brought up High Rise and Free Fire in the last couple of years, and so he just wanted to come up and sort of partake in a Q&A and a sort of in conversation piece where they went through his entire back catalogue, and from Down Terrace all the way up to Free Fire, and it was a very interesting and very funny chat. He's a very frank, candid man about sort of how to get money and how to get films made, even though the sort of odds may be against you. And it was just a very funny, entertaining piece. And we got to hear a little bit about his new film that's coming out. He's got a few sort of different things in production, but he has finished shooting a film called Calling You Anus, starring Neil Maskell, and it's about a family get-together on New Year's. He wouldn't go into too many more details, but I'm wondering if it might be slightly Shakespearean, because hearing the words "calling you anus" just makes me hear of Coriolanus, and I'm just wondering if that might be part of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I would have gone through to Glasgow just to see Ben Wheatley do a Q&A. I love that he does these UK tours with his movies, and we've had him here on the show as well. That was one of the most incredible podcast experiences I've ever had, doing an interview with Ben Wheatley himself. But yeah, he's such a great guy, and when someone like Ben Wheatley talks, you have to listen. He's always full of so much insight, and his design of making movies really is something that a lot of people can learn from, that DIY approach, and you can see it in everything that he does. You follow him on Instagram and you see the type of work he's doing. He really is an inspiring character.
Yeah, no, it was going through all the films, and he was actually sort of looking back at them, and he was actually kind of surprised about how on the nose certain things were. I mean, there was a clip from Sightseers where the Daily Mail reader is asking Alice Lowe to pick up the dog poop, and then gets his face smashed in and whatever. And he said, "Well, that's clearly a bit about Brexit Britain, isn't it?" Stuff like that. And he was just sort of going back on films, and yeah, I mean, the sound design, similar to Lynn Ramsey, I guess, is very important in all his films. And he was talking a lot about the music and stuff like that, because I'd asked him about how he felt sort of kickstarting the John Denver cinematic renaissance of 2017 with Free Fire, and he was like, "Was I the first?" And I went, "Yeah, no, you were the first." And then it sort of came into Alien Covenant and Okja as well, and all these films that had John Denver songs in them. But he was talking about how he'd written the letter to ABBA to get the rights to use
SOS,
the song in High Rise, and how he'd managed to he said, "One of my career highlights was ending that letter saying, 'Thank you for the music.'" And he was like, "Yes, good shape."
That's why he's not just a great director, he's a great writer too. Yeah. So another movie, I've got 4 left, was with probably the longest title of the festival so far: "Find this dumb little #bitch and throw her into the river." This was an interesting one. You sort of you always look through the catalogues and you think, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Oh yeah, I've heard about that one." And then you see a title like that and you think, "I want to know more." So I watched this one, and it's about a young couple of kids in Germany, and what they start doing is they have a puppy farm, and a couple of the puppies are dying, so they're in this little basket, and they decide to throw them in the river and one of the young boys films it and eventually puts it up on YouTube, which kickstarts a kind of cause of events that leads to something quite shocking, really. I was watching this movie, and some of it you think, this is a bit absurd, really. We all know what it's like, especially with the snow. We've seen no amount of people be complete idiots just to impress people on the internet the past few days. And there's at one point where this video is on the internet and it's causing this worldwide sensation. Who's this girl? Who's this girl? And at one point we see on the screen, Michael Bay will give $50,000 to whoever can find this young girl. And you thought, well, that's very bizarre. That's some bit of fiction. So, you're watching this movie, and I won't spoil where it goes because I think that's part of the surprise. But I discovered afterwards that it's kind of based on a true story of something that happened in America. And Michael Bay himself did, in fact, put out $50,000 to people that would find this person on the internet that carried out a bit of a heinous act. So it really does draw from reality in quite a few different ways. And it's not the most kind of exciting movie in the world. You watch it at a film festival and you think, this probably Natural Home will be on something like an Amazon or a Netflix. It's interesting, some good performances, a bit overly dramatic in places, but it's got a really interesting ending, and I think the message is largely universal about how we conduct ourselves on social media and how our behaviour online can kind of lead into something quite shocking happening when I think of John Ronson's book where the names escaped me, where it's all about, I think you've been publicly shamed, where it's all about things that have happened on social media and the group and mob mentality, and that's really highlighted here. So it's a nice wee movie. If you missed it at the cinema, it's not a big deal. People will eventually catch it. But I think the themes of it, despite the language differences, is universal.
Sounds like a film which will end up getting played for educational purposes in schools, actually.
Yes, definitely. I think so. So what about yourself? What did you catch also on your final day?
Well, I've only got one film left, which is the closing gala film.
Will we leave that one till last, the perfect bookend?
We can leave that one till last year.
Cool. Well, I'll race through the last three, and we go from sort of one of my less impressed movies of the festival to my favourite. The party's just beginning, kind of much heralded arrival at the festival. Karen Gillan wrote and directed this movie, and I really wanted to like this one. It's as you say, people are there, and behind me was her entire family. I can't remember the name. He was the key writer on Doctor Who for a wee while. Moffat, I think, perhaps. And most of the cast were in the rows behind me. So I was very conscious of, if I ever looked a bit bored or checked my watch, that someone would be taking it in. The film is interesting in the respect that, we know it here living in Scotland that there's a really ridiculously high death toll for male suicides, and especially in a place like the Highlands, a very remote place. Why is something like that happening so often? And I thought that was a really interesting question to pose, but I think the answer that Karen Gillan has given was just a bit messy and a bit kind of that cliche indie movie. We have this one character that's gay that commits suicide, and it's because his boyfriend is part of the local church and doesn't want to come out. You have this character played by her fellow Guardians of the Galaxy alumni Lee Pace, who is going through a bit of a divorce, leaves on a train, and then decides to come back into Inverness and go to this suicide hotspot. I just found it to be a really messy movie, and it was touched on in the Q&A afterwards that it was originally cut in a different way, but now it's sort of two different timelines all sort of zigzagging through each other, and I just found it to be a bit disorientating at times. I thought Karen Gillan showed really good promise and traits at some point, but as I mentioned with an earlier movie, it's an interesting proving ground. You make a movie like this, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from your positives, and I think there's a lot of positives to take from this movie, but I just ultimately found it quite messy and just a bit of a a disappointment. I think it's always good to have new female Scottish directors and talent showcase themselves, but this was a movie that just left me a bit disappointed, and I think much of the reviews after have been a bit on the mixed side as well. So sadly, a bit of a downer for myself.
Okay, it's one that I definitely wanted to check out as well, but I hope it does get a release in the UK. I'm not sure how big, but even just a small release would be good, because I'd seen one of her short films that she'd done. It was about a sort of former horror movie actress who now appears at conventions and stuff like that, and it was quite a funny sort of take, because I know she does a lot of conventions as well, so perhaps some of it was based on real life experience, but she should show a bit of promise in the short, so I'm still keen to check this one out.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And then I went into a brilliant double bill. I managed to try and keep myself held back from these movies as much as possible. But Lucky by John Carroll Lynch, the exit stage left of Harry Dean Stanton was wonderful. I mean, I kind of touched on it in a review I did for the website. I just love this movie. It was a really simple story about an old guy, Lucky. You know, he has a bit of a health scare, and he just sort of reassesses his life just a little bit, not too much. And he comes into encounter different people that live in this small Arizona town just north of the border, including David Lynch's Howard, who is kind of ruining his turtle making an escape. And it was just a really nice movie. I think with this, it has such powerful significance. You couldn't have scripted a better end to someone's career and life really than Harry Dean Stanton. You know, here it's impossible to watch this movie and not think of, you know, absent friends or grandparents that you've lost. And, you know, I found myself getting emotional at quite a few points. It was just, you look at Harry Dean Stanton, you know, he had such an incredible career in life, and, you know, you look at his face and his body, and you just see so many lives lived, and, you know, the stories that the character of Lucky shares with people like David Lynch's Howard, Ron Livingston's character, and so many others. You know, they're really little lovely stories about, you know, the past and where people are going, and just it was so nice. There's so many little moments that I wouldn't want to spoil, where you just find yourself smiling and thinking, this movie is just absolutely magical. You couldn't have made a better final movie than this one. So yeah, Lucky is you know, it's been out for a while in America, but now I think it'll definitely be a movie that I would imagine gets shown on the independent movie circuits here. So I highly recommend everyone check out Lucky.
No, absolutely. I've been looking through IMDb at the moment, and I can't find a confirmed release date, but hopefully someone in the UK picks it up and gets it a cinema release, because it's definitely one that I would want to see.
Yeah, and my final, and probably my favourite movie of the festival, before we get to your closer, was Foxtrot. This was another movie that caught my attention, and David Ehrlich's end-of-year montage was... the video clip for this movie was just simply a soldier dancing with a gun in the desert, and I was like, I'm sold on that one. So when I saw it on the catalogue, I thought, I need to get this movie. I need to see this one, and it was probably my favourite movie at the festival. And I think the less known about this movie, the better. I think to talk about even the middle act, the third act, would be, you know, doing a disservice. So simply put, this movie opens with an Israeli family, the Fellmans, finding out their son Jonathan has been killed in combat. And the second part is a bit of a flashback to before this movie starts. But where this movie goes from the beginning sets in kind of a chain reaction of events that go to a very unexpected place. The movie is very dark in places, but filled with great black humour. The characters are very memorable. There's so many amazing little pieces and moments and visuals that I really recommend this. It was a movie that I just was really blown away with, and I thought was a fantastic movie, and filled with so many great moments. I can't really praise it enough, and I'm finding it hard not to go into more detail, but I think I would just I would put the film in a place where I want people to see it with as little as possible, and not without me saying, well, this will happen and this might catch you by surprise. Check it out. You've got my word on it. Go see it.
Well, you've got me intrigued, so if I do get the opportunity to see it, I definitely will be checking it out.
Excellent. So you caught the closing night movie, Nae Parisian. I'm probably getting that one wrong.
Pasaran.
Nae Pasaran. Do you want to tell us a bit about your reaction to that one?
Yeah, no, this was the final film of this year's Glasgow Film Festival, and it's a documentary about a group of Scottish factory workers in the 1970s who refused to work on repairing the engines for jet planes for the Chilean Air Force that had been used in the military coup in 1974, which killed the former president and led to General Pinochet's taking over of the government. And it was an act of solidarity by these factory workers. And a Chilean documentary filmmaker has come over to Scotland and interviewed the men involved in that decision, and has then followed that up by going back to Chile to show them just what impact that decision that they made back in the 1970s had on Chile and on the rest of the world.
Yeah, this is a movie that really caught my attention because I'd never heard of this story, and I'd love to watch that documentary and find out about it. That the idea that this, events at the far side of the world and this connection to Glasgow and East Kilbride was really quite intriguing, and I'm gutted to have missed it. So it definitely sounds like it's one that I need to catch as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, it's like yourself. It was a story that I was completely unaware of, and I think thanks to this documentary, it's going to get sort of taken into the public eye now. The guys themselves are great on camera. They're very sort of funny, and they've got some great stories about the past. And shows what was quite interesting for me was actually it showed the importance of the trade unions back in the 70s, because this is something the shop stewards decided to, we're not going to work on these, we're going to refuse them, but they were backed all the way up to government to by the trade unions, because the Chilean government were putting pressure on the UK to return these because they were, well, as they said, their rightful property. So it was fascinating just how much power the trade unions had, and sort of growing up in the sort of 90s and 80s and 90s, as a kid, you didn't see that because they'd sort of been chipped away by the Tory government then. So it was fascinating to see it from that respect, but also from the fact that this small factory in Scotland actually had an impact on the Chilean government back then, and he actually goes and speaks to some of the people who were part of the government who then became sort of political prisoners at that time. And the stories that they had are quite horrific, and it was a very emotional screening. We found there was clearly a lot of people sort of connected to the families of the workers and stuff like that, and so there was a lot of tears towards the end of the film. But then it sort of ended with this massive sort of 10-minute long standing ovation because the director, they had the cast and crew, a couple of the guys over from Chile, and then 4 of the guys who'd actually worked in the factory at the time, and it was a very emotional and sort of powerful screening to be at.
So yeah, that seems like a perfect way to end the kind of Glasgow Film Festival. You start all the way in the far east of Japan, and then you end with such a local and kind of powerful story. So I think that's a tribute to the festival, and I think it sounds like we've both had a fantastic time of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it was the perfect film to end on, because I think going into the festival before they'd announced it, I'd had a suspicion that I thought the Karen Gillan film was going to close the festival because she was such a big name. But I think they got it right in getting such a local, powerful story to end on. It really sort of celebrated this sort of inclusivity and sort of passion of the film festival that they tried to put into it. And it was a film that ended with a standing ovation, but actually also started with a standing ovation as all the staff and all the volunteers of the festival were given a round of applause for all the hard work they'd done in getting the festival back on track, following the snowstorm as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. We have to think of all the different people we crossed paths with, whether at a party or tearing the tickets and everything. They're the people that really made the festival. So, a big thanks to them and all the press team, everyone that did their best to help us with all our different questions and tickets and queries and everything like that. It was a fantastic festival, and hopefully people listening to this have got, some movies that they'll definitely need to check out or seek out when they come to the cinema or streaming services. Dallas's. So Dallas, you wrote quite a lot of reviews during the festival. If people wanted to go into a bit more depth with some of them, where can people kind of find your reviews and seek you out online?
Well, my Twitter handle is champcelluloid, and my blog is championshipcelluloid.blogspot.com, and I've got most of my reviews from the Glasgow Film Festival and all the other sort of Oscar films up there at the moment. But I think for myself, I think the top film of the festival for me was Isle of Dogs, but for you it was Foxtrot, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I definitely go with that. It's been a fantastic festival, and I look forward. I think before you know it, Edinburgh will be here, and we'll have to do another wrap up at the end of that as well. So kind of stay tuned to us for that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dallas. I really appreciate it, and hopefully people will definitely check these movies out.
Yeah, and I think it's if we find out sort of release dates or ways to catch these films, we'll put them online and let you guys know how to find them.
Quite right. Yeah, that's the way it is. It's just not as us. It's all well and good us talking about them, but we've got to make it easy for you people to find this stuff as well. So thank you very much for joining me again, Dallas, and we'll hopefully have you on again soon.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, and yes, bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.